All right, hope everyone can see my screen. We're just gonna dive right in. Cool, so we've got just a ton of tips today for all of you. These are things that some may be obvious and you're using frequently, but some might be even so obvious that you didn't even know they were there. So we're gonna go through a bunch of those, and we've sort of broken them out into categories too as we go through it. Let's just do it. Here we go. Cool. So the first one, and again, we're going to start a little obvious or a little maybe at the beginning, so to speak, is opening the quick menu. So everybody might be familiar with the idea that you can get to the menu over here. This little drop down will give you full access to the menu. You can also quickly pop this open with Command / or Control /, and you'll see there that it instantly focuses on the search bar too, which is super helpful because you can do a lot with this menu. You can just run commands directly from here, so you can do anything like editing or exporting or changing, scaling, all those kinds of things. You can also run plugins directly from here. So you basically, in just one shortcut, you can quickly just run any plugin you want. Maybe you've got some plugin that you're constantly running. It's just a really quick way to get back to it. And there is reload plugin, but this is good for when you're just sort of quickly looking at different ones. Awesome. A couple other just sort of basic ones as far as navigating around. The layers panel and the assets panel can both be accessed with the number keys by holding down Option. So, or Alt if you're on PC. Option 1 and Option 2, if you see that, it's going to switch between the layers panel and the assets panel. And what's really cool about the assets panel is similar to the menu that we had a second ago. It's going to automatically focus on the search bar, so you can just start looking for components that you need or things that you're trying to find. Super helpful. And one that's maybe a little bit less known is that you can actually do the same thing with the right-hand panel too, with Option 8, 9, and not 9, 0. Look at that. There we go. Fixing it on the fly. Awesome. So if you do Option 8, you'll get the design panel. 9, you get the prototyping panel. And 0, you'll get the code panel. So super useful.
Anthony, I've got a really short question here, and I think it may help people track. If you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and actually, would you do this? Would you share this file as view only to everyone in the chat?
Absolutely.
And that way people can just track along. We're going to share it as view only. That way you're not overwriting on top of the demo, but duplicate this draft and kind of follow along on your own if you'd like.
Definitely. Let me just drop this right in the chat so we got it. Awesome. There we go. And also, we will publish this file out to the community too afterwards. So if you happen to not be at a place where you can look at the file right now, we're going to put it online, and you'll be able to copy it to your own drafts as well. Very cool. I'm just going to put this in here just in case, so we have the right settings. Awesome. Looking great. And hopefully everyone can get into the file. Cool. Another really great one, and this is actually this is just the ability to switch browser tabs really easily. This will also work in the desktop application if you have multiple files open. And this is not something that's necessarily specific to Figma for the browsers, but if you have multiple files open, so if I have multiple tabs open, you can always use Command Control to hit 1, 2, 3 up through 9. If you happen to hit a number more than the number of tabs that you have, it's just going to go to the last tab in the file as well. So again, it works on Mac and PC and most major browsers as well. Cool. Let's move on to someone about the canvas. Next frame, previous frame, very useful. If you just hit N, you will go to the next frame. Shift N will take you back to the previous frame. Again, positions of your frames are going to make a big difference as far as what is considered next and previous. So just keep that in mind as you're doing it. It can be very helpful for when you're just trying to scale through things. Oh man, this is awesome seeing everybody in here in the file with us.
It never gets old. It never gets old.
Never gets old. All right, we're gonna make a high five spot right up here.
I love it.
Awesome. Woo. Great. Cool. Let's move on. Zoom to selection. Okay, so these two are pretty cool. You may already be familiar with the idea that you can zoom in many different ways. You can hit plus and minus. Just plus and minus by themselves will actually zoom in and out. You can also zoom to selections. So if you actually have something selected, like I'm just going to select this square, and then you hit Shift 2, you'll see it zooms right in on that square. So if you are working, let's say, on a sheet of icons, or you've got something that you're just trying to, maybe you found it in the layers panel, but you're actually having trouble finding it on the page, you can hit Shift-2 and it'll take you right to it. And then one that I actually end up using a lot more that's pretty great is Z. And then you can actually, if you hit Z, if you click once, it's going to zoom in. You can also hit Option Z and click again and zoom out. Those are really useful. But one really cool one that you can do is if you hit Z and drag a rectangle, it's actually going to zoom in to your selection size. So let's say you're working, again, on a giant canvas or something like that, and I want to zoom in on this one particular part. I can hold down Z, I can drag out, and it's going to zoom in directly to the size that I drew out there. Cool. We're going to keep moving along. Resizing. So you may have resized some frames before and gotten maybe a behavior you weren't expecting, probably due to what we have, which is called constraints. So every object that's within a frame knows its own position relative to the frame that it's around. And I'm just going to, you'll see here, as I drag this outer frame, this inner frame is currently set to center, meaning I want the contents to always be in the center of the parent frame, which may be what you want. And oftentimes setting those kinds of constraints is really useful. However, there might be instances where maybe you didn't want things to move, or you were maybe trying to move a different corner. Like if you're trying to move the top left corner and it's getting confusing as to why everything is shifting with it. So what you can do is you can hold down Command, again, or Control, and this will actually ignore constraints momentarily. As soon as you let go of Control, the constraints are going to turn back on again. But again, just really useful for when you want to stretch something out in a certain direction. Cool. I'm going to, given everyone's selections going, I'm just going to hide cursors for a little bit right now. So this is going to be another little tip that I can show you is in the options menu or Option Command / Alt Control / on PC, you'll be able to hide the multiplayer cursors. I love you all, and we will bring you back for some more high fives.
Yeah, you are beautiful, but get out of here for a second.
Cool. Another really fun one. This actually comes from so this is something that's been a part of illustration tools for a long time, or production design tools. It's called outline mode, which is super useful. It turns out it has a lot of uses. If you have shapes on your screen like this, and you ever want to just see things in their outline, you can hit Command Y, and we're going to pop right into outline mode. So this means that only the outlines are visible. Frames will be dotted outlines, shapes will be solid outlines, text will be solid outlines, and things like that. And this actually has a couple of good uses. One of them being, let's say you have a shape, or here's a frame that looks relatively empty, isn't it? We turn on outline mode. There's actually a ghost inside of this frame. You can hide, so this will help you maybe identify things that are outside of your frame, but are still there. You can use the layers panel to do this as well, but sometimes this can just be a useful way to look at those kinds of things. Or if you have lots of layers on top of each other, sometimes this can help cut down on the noise and the clutter and just make it easier to look at. Oops, there we go. Another fun thing that you can do in outline mode is you can just make some really fun shapes and things like that. I'm going to post something later today. A cool little thing I found that you can do. Awesome.
Is it going to involve that ghosty?
It does involve the ghost. It's going to be one of my little Figma jig things. So we'll post that later.
Oh, sure. That's great.
Awesome. Cool. So let's talk a little bit more about layers and frames, because these are some useful ones that, again, when you're working with a lot of content and you're working with really articulate designs, or maybe you have a lot of things going on, sometimes clicking into things isn't going to be the fastest. I mean, if you know what you're doing, if you know what you're looking for, or it was a design that you made, it's probably not a huge deal. But imagine being handed a file from either another designer or something that you found in the community, and you want to just be able to traverse it in a logical way. There's a couple good shortcuts for this. So if you have a frame selected like this, you can hit Tab. In fact, we'll go into this frame. So you can hit Tab to just switch between the layers, and you can hit Shift Tab to go to the previous layers. Another one that's kind of similar to this. So this is going to be moving between layers that are at the same depth within a frame. But what you can also do is you can move between the depths of the children and the parent layers as well by using return. So tab and shift tab, return and shift return are going to give you full control over moving through all of your layers. So if you watch over here on my layers panel on the side, you'll see that as I select this frame, enter to go into the next layer, tab to select the first one, enter to go inside that, and now I'm selected inside the inside layer, shift return to back out. I can also then just go back in again. If you've ever used a tool like the Chrome Inspector, some of this stuff is going to be a little bit similar as to how the traversing works. The shortcuts are different, but the same idea is applying here, that you're just moving in and out.
I mean, it's conceivable that you would never have to use a mouse again, huh? Could you just design the whole thing? I want to see it.
We definitely have some keyboard fanatics, I think, on the team, which is good because the keyboard shortcuts are what save us a lot of time. I hope people have caught some of Martian's talks here and there, and it's pretty awesome to have it all. But yeah, that would actually be a good. What if we did a contest where it was just
like how much can you possibly design with only keyboard commands?
Yeah, so no mouse designing. You know what? This might be a good.
Everybody rolls in with mechanical keyboards. You know it's true.
Yeah. Also, I saw that people were asking for like Figma coming back, right? That could be a good one. So
I love it.
Cool. Let's keep on moving on. A couple cool examples here to look at. So copy and paste layer styles. So just to set the stage a little bit, what we mean when we say layer styles is the different layer properties that you can apply over here. So this is true for both styles as well as just properties that are over in the design panel. So each of these properties can actually be individually selected as well, and you can actually copy and paste properties individually just using Command C and Command V. But more often I find what's the most valuable is to, you have an object selected and you want basically some other objects to have the same properties as it. So if you hit Option Command C and then Option Command V, again, Alt Control on PC, you're gonna get all of those properties get copied over. So you can see here that it's actually taking all those properties, copying them over. This is an example here that's just using a linear stroke, linear gradient on a stroke with a fill. This will work for other properties too. So here you can see we have an image fill as well as a border radius on this object. And if you copy this, you'll see it not only applied the image fill, but also the border radius property too. And both of these work on text too. So if you have text selected and you hit Option Command Paste, you're going to be able to get that property directly onto the text. I actually don't know what happens with border radiuses. Okay, cool. So it does not transfer border radiuses to text objects. If you wanted to, though, you could convert this to an outline. And then now you get some nice rounded letters with Woody in there too as well. Very nice.
I am curious about the extent to which properties it actually does translate over. Like for instance, I've never done this, but I'm guessing that it doesn't copy paste over like rotation. Is that true, or do you know if that's true?
Yeah, so it's going to be layer styles. So blending modes. So if you've set anything as far as blending modes, fills, stroke, and effects, and border radius. I believe that's the extent of it. There's probably a list on help.com, but
yeah,
that would be an awesome thing for somebody. If somebody wants to go and do an exploration on exactly what that is.
I am curious.
One other, if you're looking for like why might this be useful, or what's like a common use case for this, one that I find quite frequently might be something where you've gone ahead and you've set up a shape, let's say with a particular property like this, and I have it as a rectangle. Maybe I'm making a dialog box or something like that, and I realize I actually want these properties not on the rectangle themselves, but on a containing frame. So I want to actually wrap this rectangle in a frame. I can wrap the rectangle in the frame real quick, but now the properties are still on the rectangle inside of the frame. So what I can do instead is I can say copy, paste, grab my rectangle. Maybe I've got another blank one and I just want to actually paste those properties inside of it. So now you can see here, I actually have a rectangle inside of this frame, and the frame is the one that has the properties on it. So for moving things between containing elements and inner elements can be a good use case for that too.
We do have one question for you, and I feel like you
Yeah.
would probably be the best person to answer this. Christian Baptiste says, would love to see the ability to customize keyboard shortcuts similar to how the Fireworks UI used to do it. What do you know about customizing shortcuts?
Yeah, so in the web experience that we have today, it's any customization you're going to have to do at like the OS layer, and it may or may not work as you expect. So right now in Figma, when you're using the browser experience, most of the shortcuts are going to be what is prescribed by Figma. Now, keep in mind, there are lots of duplicates for most shortcuts too. So there are certain applications that may hijack particular shortcuts. So we've tried to keep at least one or two for most things in the system. So if you go into the keyboard shortcuts area, so this little menu in the corner, you can also hit Control Shift question mark, which I believe would be Windows key Shift question mark on a PC. Maybe somebody can find out if I'm correct on that or not. But if you go to the keyboard shortcuts on the PC, via the menu, you're going to see that there's actually a whole page of a ton of good shortcuts. There's even a game if you actually, there's a little surprise at the end if you fill them all out. Now, on the desktop application, we actually do have a beta of the desktop application that is available. And I believe that there is some work being done around custom keyboard shortcuts and things like that. So definitely stay tuned for updates on that front. But that would be a good place to start.
I do know that I've also seen an article out there about using customizations on the OS level. So I'm trying to find that. But I feel like that could be a good workaround for the time being. But thanks for that question, Christian.
Yeah, and it does work with certain commands, but there are things that are going to be trickier to remap just because of the way that we are listening for those kinds of keyboard events. I use a tool called Better Touch Tool, which is actually, it's pretty wonderful. It is a paid tool, but what you can do is you can set up everything for custom touch bar, magic mouse, trackpad, keyboard shortcuts, key sequences, so macros, if you're familiar with that concept. Tons of crazy things that you can do here. Again, that is going to be, I think it's a paid application, so I'm not representing it or anything, but your mileage may vary, but I find it pretty useful for a lot of different things that I do. Cool. Keep moving on. I like tip day. This is fun.
You're good at it. Keep going.
Great. So another good one that I find to be really useful or confusing when it doesn't do what I expect it to do, which is resetting text layer names. So if you have a layer with some texts in it, and we're just going to write Figma. Nice. Look at that. Let's reset that so that it actually has the right line height. Awesome. If I change this text layer's name to say something like kittens, as you do, you'll notice now that my text and my layer name are not the same. Now, there may be lots of really good cases for why you want to do this. If you have text layers inside of components and you're changing them with overrides, and then you're swapping components, the names of those text layers are going to be crucial in how it understands how to preserve those overrides. However, there are plenty of times when you may say, this is not that useful to me because I don't know what kittens is. I have nothing that says kittens on my page. So what you can always do is double click or Command R for rename and delete all of the text. And if you just hit enter now, it's going to reset that back to whatever the value of the text field is. Keep in mind, if this is really long, it will have a really long name. I believe it truncates eventually, but just a good tip to know. Cool. One last one that I find myself using more and more these days as an alternative to doing masking is if you are simply trying to take a bunch of maybe components or objects and you want to just put them inside of a clipped frame, you don't actually need to go through the process of setting up a full mask to do that. A couple other things with masks is masks are going to require another element, and then they're also going to be inside of a group. And then the masking properties are going to continue to apply. So masks are great for when you're actually doing true masking. But if you just want to clip the edges of certain frames, maybe you have a navbar menu or some sort of shadow properties or things are overextending beyond where you really want them to, take your selection and you can actually frame them real easily with Option Command G or again, Alt Control G. And this is going to wrap your entire selection in a frame. From here, what you can do is if you turn on clip content, it's really easy to just adjust the clipping on that. So it's almost like masking, but what we're doing is we're clipping with a frame instead. One of the great use cases for quickly putting something inside of a frame. You can also quickly remove a frame with Command-Shift-G. I'll be sure to add that in here as well. So Option Command G and Option Shift and Command Shift G. Again, so quickly grouping and ungrouping and wrapping in frames as well. So frames, for those who don't know, frames are really the backbone for how a lot of the design work grows as far as containers and things like that. Frames have properties that groups do not, such as constraints and grids and a few other really powerful features. So I find myself gravitating towards frames for actual design elements. This is generally a good approach. I do still use groups, not as frequently. Some of the times that I think groups are really valuable is when you're trying to create mental groupings, right? Or just associations for yourself, maybe in the layers panel. Or another great one is if you have a bunch of layers all spread out at different depths and you're just trying to get them all together, you can select them all, or maybe use select all with one of those properties and quickly group them. And what that's going to do is actually bubble them all up together, and then you can actually move forward and do what you were doing. So it's almost like a quick, like, hey, let me grab all of you and put that together. Pretty useful. Again, it's just going to depend on the kind of work that you're doing, but framing selections and clipping is a great way to not have to add additional layers for masks and things like that when working with rectangles. Important disclaimer there.
Yeah, right.
Which, you know, a lot of UI design that we're doing, we're often working, whether or not we visually have boxes, there are certainly lots of boxes going on.
Awesome. I feel like
Awesome.
the web and the world was founded, and the design world was founded on boxes.
You'll notice some interesting edge cases with some properties that you're like, oh, I really thought that wasn't going to be a square, and it ends up being a square. But story for another day. Cool. Should I pass it off to you, Rogie, for a few?
Pass it off to me, and just to reinvigorate the group, we've got a little high five over here by my face. I'll try not to move it away from you, but then I'm going to go ahead and share screen. And let's get some high fives in there. I'd love to see all your little cursors. Look at your cursors. They're beautiful. Hi, Dan. Hi, Louie. Hi, Brandon. Louisana. Hello. How's it going? Hey, Patrick. All right. So let's jump right on in. I'm going to go ahead and turn off your beautiful cursors, which I love. Marco, good to see you. Natan. I'm butchering your names, I'm sure, but I am saying them, and I think that's important. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about images and fills. Specifically, we're going to talk about like placing images. So you may know about placing images through this command here or through this menu, place image. If you're like me, you probably knew about it because you just dragged and dropped an image right onto the canvas, which is a great way to do it. I do that all the time. But if you're ever wanting to bring in quite a bit, you can always just hit Command-Shift-K, and it'll bring up a dialog to choose multiple or one image. So I'm going to come in here in my little side project that you're not supposed to know about, and I'm going to grab 3 of these images. And as soon as I grab 3 of those images, in Mac, I can hold Shift and select multiple of them. But you'll notice up here, the context of this menu up here changes, and it'll tell you what to do. It'll say click or drag to place or place all. If I place all, and it's probably just the same as just clicking on the canvas. Well, actually, clicking on the canvas will place them all one by one. But let's do that again. Let's just try the place all just to see what that experience is like. Boom, it places all. It's a little inconvenient. They're all on top of each other. But what if I had like a series of components that all had images, and I'd like to populate all those? Maybe I've got a bunch of cool pictures of national parks or horror movies like I like. I can't tell you how many times I've done horror movie mockup apps. It's stupid. All right, so let's take 4 because we have 4 of these. And you'll notice that my cursor changes and it tells me how many I have. Whoa. Oh, okay, just lost that. But if I click here, let's see here, what did we do? Let me just see. Anthony and I both noticed something here. If you have this color fill assigned to a style, it actually won't honor that. I'll keep it locked to that style. So it's important to unlock those when you're doing this. Let's try this again. All right, so we've got 4 images, and we're just going to simply click on each object, and it'll fill with each one of the images in the order that I got them. So that's a really cool one. You can also just drag a slew of images right onto the desktop. That works as well. In fact, that experience is often a little bit better just because it'll arrange them in a little bit, not right on top of each other, which I think is nice.
Mm-hmm. You can also
go ahead.
You can also do the drag out while you're placing too. Did you? Maybe you did.
That's right. That's right. And we'll also demonstrate pasting as a fill as well. Mm-hmm. So let's just, let me go to Chrome here and just type in National Park. I'm going to be careful with my Chrome searches. I don't know what it would ever turn up, but let's just say this beautiful imagery here. And I copy that image, or I copy it from my desktop. I can actually just come into this object here, paste it, and it'll paste that image right in. Now, if I'm on the canvas, of course, I can just paste that right here, and it'll just plop the image onto the canvas. The cool thing about this
avatars, right? Like
what'd you say?
Like for avatars, you've cut down not needing a mask layer and things like that. You can just use the image fills. So
totally. And this is something I talked about in my vector session, Anthony, is that I love that all objects, whether they're an image object here or they're a vector object here, they're really just like a vector frame. And then you can just paste right into them. So meaning if I use that tip from Anthony and I do Option Command C to copy my styles and Option Command V, it'll just paste that right in. Anthony was also alluding to this earlier as well. I'm going to come here, is that I can actually choose to just pick out what I want. Maybe I don't want all of the attributes here. Maybe there's some blend modes or strokes or whatever, and I just want that image. You'll see it goes blue. I can Command C here, Command V here, that image will go in. Boom, I can put it onto text. I can actually, and this is what I love about it too, is that I can actually just take this text. This hasn't even been broken down or outlined into a vector, and I can still paste it. And that image, it's just treated, or that text is just treated like another object, like a circle, like a frame, like all this stuff. I can just stack up all my fills. All right.
Rogie, we got a quick question, a little unrelated, but what's the app for casting your keyboard shortcuts that you got right now?
Well, this is office hours, so I am happy to share all these things. Actually, I'm happy to share no matter what. This one's really nice. It's called Keystroke Pro. It is a paid-for app. I don't think it's that expensive. I think it's maybe 20 bucks. And especially if you're streaming, it's really, really great. It also changes, and I didn't know this. I'm all dark mode now. And it actually changes the keys on light and dark mode, and you can change positions on the screen as well. Super cool, really like it. I think it's made by a single developer here, Martin Lexau. Awesome app. All right. All right, so here's another one too. So when I first started working with images, if I ever wanted to be able to crop this or pan or zoom into a certain portion of this image, I'd have to come into here, I'd go to crop, and then, of course, now the crop UI is available and I can start cropping. Maybe I want to get Anthony's little kitty, Georgia, into here and get really, this is
my dog,
cool.
Georgia, I think is what you mean.
I mean, Anthony's dog, Georgia. But if you ever want to just get right to that, not like 2-3 clicks away, if you hold Option or Alt and double click right on that image, you'll immediately be transported via space and time into this little crop UI. I can now crop this thing, move this image, expand, really get into the beauty that is Georgia. I love that one. I use that one all the time. Here's another one I use relentlessly, swap, stroke, and fill. This is something that's familiar to me from Illustrator and this always need to like swap and stroke and fills. It's a super easy one. It's Shift X, and it'll just swap those two things. Start using it. You'll probably start realizing there's a lot of reasons you might use this thing. Mm-hmm. All right. This is something that I've done within some of our assets for the designer advocates, is I save my image fills as styles. So let's say this is an image. It might even be an illustration within your illustration library. Let's say this lovely photo of my pug, Pua, who is a cat here, right, Anthony? Who is a cat? Absolutely. So let's say we want this in our library. We've done this with our designer advocate photos and stuff like that. Instead of just having a fill here, what I'll do is actually create a style. Oops, sorry. Create a style here and just add it. And maybe I'll just put in like images and I'll put my cat Pua. So I can create that style. The only thing that I wish was a little bit better and I hope improves is that it is just so very hard to see these little thumbnails. But if you have a series of images here, you can go ahead and apply those. So now I can just go here, drop it down, and now it's saved into a save style. And there's Pua. He's great. And as a test, let's go ahead and see. Let's go ahead and see if we cropped Pua and we had some positioning settings for him, and then we saved that. Now what would happen if I actually just applied that here? And it looks, I'm not sure. I can't really, it looks like it is trying to save the crop settings and then it's actually squishing it because of the size. So, all right, lastly with saving image fills and style, over here, we've got a repeating pattern. So if I simply hit Command Option C and paste it here, it's a larger object, but since it's set up as a repeating pattern here, you can see it's a tile. It'll actually just go and stretch and repeat to the whatever dimensions this is here. But let's say I've got that really cool repeating pattern as a part of my library, simply just do the same thing. I'm going to add in to my images, and maybe this is my background tile. Great, I can create the style. I can come here, boom, I'm repeating.
Love it.
Lastly, within images, do we have a question?
We had a great comment from Christian. I just wanted to mention, they said, one great thing is that you can just paste an image and immediately start rounding the corners on an image. And I think that that's a good thing to call out because you're never going to have just an image by itself. It's always, even when you paste them, it's going to be a shape with an image fill. Right. So all of the properties that you would have on a shape are going to be properties that you'd be able to apply to an image as well. So it's great call out there. That's a really good tip.
I think that's like one of the more subtle tips that I actually didn't know. It just worked how I expected it to work, which I really love that. But yeah, in this situation, I just dragged an image from my desktop. I don't have to now mask this image. And I remember doing this, like in Illustrator, masking this image because I'm like, oh, I got to take a shape. Nope, I can just come right here to these border radius handles and I can start working with that image directly. So I think that's awesome. Good one, Christian. Lastly, just want to talk about images and copying and pasting them. So say I wanted this image here. I can actually just right click. I love this. I can copy as ping. Now this only works in the desktop. So of course, if I paste it here, it pastes in as a ping. So I do this a lot as well when I'm like shooting over a comp to somebody, even though typically maybe I just want to show a small portion of it. Just want to say, hey, is this icon looking good? And I don't want to send them a whole Figma file. Boom, you can do this. It's like a quick export. I believe this is a quick export at 1x though. The other thing that you can do is copy as CSS, but you can also copy as SVG. So this isn't a really great example of SVG. Let me just draw a few. Actually, I'm going to borrow something from Anthony. Coming into your files, man.
Hey, that's what
I'm going to just take
open design. That's what we're doing.
That's right.
Also, wait, we got a question. Did you really call it a ping? You and I might even be on different pages about
I did. What do you call it? A pinge?
A PNG. Yeah.
That's too many syllables. Too many syllables. I'm not gonna. I disagree vehemently. But thank you for calling that out. The cool thing about this little command for copying as, I don't even need a frame. I don't even need export presets. So I can just take any object on the screen and right click copy as SVG. Now let's just see if this SVG actually works. Let's come here. I just got a code pen up so I can actually just slam in this SVG code. How does it work? Will it work? It does work. It's great. Awesome. I love that.
Super useful.
Super useful. All right, moving on here. I'd like to have some time at the end to field more questions and explore with y'all. So I'll do this as quickly as I can. You may know about this. Instead of clicking over here, then the eyedropper, then dropping, a quick keyboard shortcut would be just to press I, and now I can just select my color. Now, I didn't learn this one until about a month ago. If I click that eyedropper tool, and instead of just clicking on an object, I can now hold down my mouse button, and I can scan it around the area. Sometimes you're scanning on like a raster graphic, maybe it's like a JPEG, you're trying to find like a really cool nuanced color. So here I am, boom, I let go, and there it is. Another color tip here is that you can actually nudge color values. So say for some reason you're liking this teal, but you're thinking I want it to be a little bit darker. I can hold down, so I can actually just hit the down button, and you can barely tell that it's working. But if I hold shift, I can use my nudge settings to actually increment darker and darker. at a more rapid rate, or I can go the other way and actually increment upward.
Mhm.
Another really cool thing about this is these sort of little nudge, what would I say, like nudge keyboard shortcut, like they work within these other values too. So like say I'm on hue, saturation, and lightness, I can actually just bump up the hue. But say I'm in CSS, this is where it gets weird. This is a RGBA, RGB alpha, red, green, blue, alpha. I can actually be on this one color value here and actually bump that one. So I'm just bumping my reds up. And you can see that this is actually going more towards the red in the spectrum. It is kind of, these are fun little hidden secrets and tricks that I don't know if I would have ever discovered, but there they are. Anthony, it's back to you, buddy.
Awesome, awesome. We'll move through these quickly so we can get to some questions too. Cool. Great. Oh, and also we did have a question on that pattern. That was a pattern that I made a while ago. It's actually a really cool process of how you make hand-drawn repeat patterns. Maybe we'll do a thing on it sometime. But Rogie, let's definitely get it on a shirt.
Wait, you actually made that? You drew that?
Yeah, it's cool. It was actually I had a blog post on it. I should go find it again. But yeah, basically you hand draw something, and then you do this cool technique of cutting up the paper and repositioning, and then you can scan it in and all that kind of stuff. So.
I'm so glad it's yours. You made this stream yours. I love it.
Awesome. Cool. So let's talk about flattening selections. So this one's really useful for when you have a handful of shapes. For example, you may have two objects that you want to combine together. So here we have a triangle and we have a square, and I could put the same drop shadow on this rectangle here. I could try and do it and make it look right. It's just not going to look right. Or maybe I want to copy the styles like we did before, but it's still not exactly the right effect, right? I want these objects to actually be combined together. So you can select your objects and just hit Command E, Control E, and now you're going to have a single vector shape, and you'll notice that that fill property actually applies to both of them now. So I actually get the depth that I was hoping to get here. That is not the only way to make this shape. You could also put the effects on a parent frame or on a group. There are other approaches to this. You could even just do this with one shape, just showing off one example, right? You could always just grab this shape and also just poke out a little corner here. But for quick mocking up and things like that, this is just a really good way to know that you can combine things whenever you need to. So.
Love it.
Cool. Outlining. Okay, so if you have shapes, some of the properties are going to be rendered to the canvas, and some of them are going to be sort of saved and stored for the time being. And what I mean by that, a good example is border radius, right? So here we have a shape that has a border radius on it. Now this border radius is being set by the border radius property. So if I double click onto this into an edit mode, you'll notice that the nodes for my shape are still in the corners, right? So we're still, again, working with boxes again, right?
Yeah.
What you can do though, is if you truly want that actual shape to be, let's call it rendered or outlined, you can actually just hit Command Shift O. There we go. And what that's going to do is, oops, not my Octa. I believe that there is another shortcut for this too that we can actually get to it faster. I'm going to give Rogie a second, maybe if you want to look that one up for me. You can always right click on these objects too and just hit outline. So mine's just taken over by another application, but there are ways around that as well. I believe there's another shortcut for this, but you can always just right click and say outline stroke. And what you're going to get is that the shape is going to change a little bit. I'm not going to do it to this one. I did it to this one right here just so that I can compare the two. You'll see now that in this version, the nodes are actually going to be creating the curves manually. So we're actually using Bezier curves and curve handles to actually create that shape. So a little bit different. One of the things to note is that I won't actually be able to restore that border radius on this one. And it's going to actually act a little bit different when we change the size, because now those particular angles have been set into the shape. Whereas here, this is actually just saying, I always want the same radius. Other good use cases for when you might want to be doing this would be something like actually adding another stroke to something, or maybe you actually want this stroke to be part of the shape. You can run that same command again, and you're going to get both of those things as separate shapes, which you can then adjust them independently and even add new strokes to the outside of the next one or something like that. So interesting things that you can do there. You can also do this for text. If you're doing anything really creative with text, or maybe you're doing some really advanced typography and you want to do some interesting ligatures or other things like that, you can always run the same command again, outline stroke, and now you actually have this text as a path, as an object that you can actually adjust different angles to. As somebody who has a little bit of a heart for typography, please be very careful with messing with the metrics of typefaces. The typographers put a lot of work into the metrics that they've set. Just make sure that you're doing things that are very intentional, so to speak.
One
cool.
thing, you were talking about the outline stroke, and I thought that, especially, I think we always get into a place where we're like, oh, I remember there was a keyboard shortcut, but I don't remember it, and I don't want to go through this huge list. Why don't you show them the little tip about the quick menu?
Right.
Just
so remember
that up.
Yeah, that menu that we looked at the beginning. Pop open the menu with Command / Control /, and you can just go ahead and just type in outline, and it's going to be the first option on your list. Again, you can just run the commands directly from here by hitting return or enter, and there you go. So a very quick way to get at that menu too as well. Sweet. Talking about the arc tool now. So you may be familiar with the arc tool. The arc tool is that really cool handle that if you have an ellipses and you select the arc, you're going to be able to actually set the sweep of an arc. You can also set the ratio of the arc as well. Very useful, but as with everything else where you have shift, where shift is going to give you bigger increments, the same is true for the arc. So you'll actually get degrees you'll get 15 degrees. Unfortunately, our tool, it's doing it out of a percentage of 100, so the percentages may not make a whole lot of sense, but it is 15 degrees for every stop point here that we have. Again, great for just sort of the arcs if you're trying to set exact angles. You can also do the same thing with the sweep up here. So, a couple cool examples there. Cool. Moving a little bit quickly through these ones here. Adding keywords to components. Okay, so this is super useful, and I cannot explain how often I use this now, and I can't explain. I use it a lot. What you can do is in your component description. So over here, you might have some usage guidelines or something like that. You can also add keywords. So I'm just going to put in some keywords like this is a button that it's meant for the blog. Maybe you've got it in a library that's specifically atomic components, but not broken out by use cases. You can use keywords and tags to actually give yourself another additional layer of grouping for those kinds of things. So maybe blog. This is also a legacy button because maybe we need to support some older browsers, and we're doing a mock for that as well. And then maybe also this is just in my kittens group. You'll notice if I go to the assets panel, so again, option 2, and just start searching for blog, I get that exact component, or maybe kittens as well, right? So you're gonna get those showing up under those groupings as well. Again, just great ways to either cross-cut or subgroup your component library. Cool. Swapping component instances. Okay, so this one is going to be a few different things to cover. So you know that you can, if you have a component instance selected, there is an instance swapping menu over here on the right-hand side. The related components are going to show up together. You can always search all of your components locally and in your libraries. Additionally, you can also swap them from the assets panel. So if you go to the assets panel, and let's say we just look up sample, you can always grab a button, and if you're holding down option, it's going to swap out top-level components right away. Pretty cool. Another cool way that you can swap is you can actually right-click and say swap instance, and this is just going to give you just the subgroupings of the related components. So either they're in the same naming convention or they're on the same frame together, the source components themselves, and you can swap them out that way as well. You can also quickly swap subcomponents or nested components in the same, nested instances in the same way as well. So if you have something like a button like this, the difference here is that we're gonna, instead of hitting just, oh, and actually, sorry, I just realized I have a little bit of an issue there. It's not gonna be control, it's gonna be option for this one. But luckily, auto layout to the rescue. Beautiful. Awesome. For the nested ones, it's gonna be option and command at the same time. So if we grab something like just an icon, maybe we want to swap out just this little icon right here. That's now going to, because I'm holding down command as well, it's also going to be just the nested components, so I can quickly just swap them out like that. again, because these are all grouped together too, I can always right click, swap, and then there's all my icons right there. So just some really, some good ways to quickly swap out components and nested instances and things like that. And that was the same example I just showed you a second ago, but an important note here that I've left is that the instances must be grouped if you're using that menu over here, meaning that they must share either the same naming convention, like they're in the same / group, like buttons / primary or something, or they are on the same frame together, because that's what's going to create groupings in the assets panel as well. So.
We did have one question here from Yorby. Is there a way to hide an instance from the search, but not from the instances panel?
Hide an instance from the search, but not from the instances panel. So you want to be able to browse for it, but not search for it. I do not know, actually. I don't know if that's possible or not.
I'm glad I threw that one to you, because I didn't know either. I don't know if that's a possibility. We can look into it.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, there's another technique where you can hide components from being published by putting a period or an underscore in front of them, but I'm pretty sure that will not hide them from the search, so they'll still be searchable. I don't know. We'll have to get back to you on that one. Cool. You want to do a little bit of prototypes, or how are we doing?
Yeah, I can do these very quickly. I'd like to get done in just a few minutes so we can open up more questions at the end there.
Awesome.
All right, let's see, prototypes. Yeah, just something to know. You can actually show and hide hotspots. We've had this question a few times. I don't think that this prototype actually has a hotspot on it, but just good to know that here we can see it here. Show hotspot hints on click. That's good to know. Another thing, and this one's a little bit tricky, is that you can show and hide the toolbar and the footer. Let's go look at that here. So one thing to note about this is as soon as I show hide the toolbar, this is my toolbar. So my toolbar disappears and I have no access to this. So you have to remember this, Command or Control /. So now you can see it's gone forever. Really great, professional. Down here gives you a little hint. Oh, I need Command or Control /. Boom, my toolbar's back. So those are really handy when you're giving presentations. Let's see here. I think maybe what we can do is just let the crew look at this on their own. These are all kind of OS and browser level stuff, which are good, handy tips. We've given you a link to the file. Also, we'll go ahead and publish this to the community. That way you can look at it again and again and maybe make it better. But let's open this thing up for more questions. We have got about probably five to 7 minutes.
Awesome.
This one would be good for you. Akil said, is there any guidance on the component swap shortcut key equivalent for Windows? Is that just because maybe you had it wrong in the frame there?
Yeah, it's possible. So on Windows, it's going to be either just Alt, so Option on Mac, Alt on Windows, or Alt plus Control for doing the nested ones. In fact, I've got a link to the documentation, which I'll drop into the channel right now too. So.
Oh, awesome. Oh, okay. This one, I know you know a lot about this. I know only a little, but Nathan said, is there a way to save our prototype settings? Mine always resets. I think that I would love, because I think you know more about this, Anthony. From what I know about prototypes, if you change some of these settings here, and you can't actually tell that it's happening here, but if you change these settings, the actual share link for this, so say we change some of these show hotspots on click and all this, this should change. And actually, let me see if I can do this. I would like to be able to really showcase what's happening here. Oh, right. Where are we at? We'll just take this old presentation of mine. Notice up here, these are query string variables. You don't need to remember any of those. But if I go ahead and change this, in the browser, you can actually notice that it's changing this URL. So that means that when you share this prototype, those settings will be saved into this. Now, of course, when I go back out and then I click go play again or present again, it's just going to go back to the defaults, but I can save it in that URL. Now, once again, I only showed the browser because I felt like it would illustrate that they're changing. But of course, if you hit share prototype, you should be able to preserve those settings in the URL bar. Correct me if I'm right on that one or wrong, Anthony.
No, that's correct. Yeah, so those settings are not only are they not specific to the prototype, but they're also not specific to the user, so they will reset. But you can, as long as you have them, the URL parameters in the URL, the query parameters in the URL, that's what it will start with. So.
Awesome.
Especially for things like user testing, that ends up being rather useful, so that you don't have to explain to the user, hey, I need you to hide the UI. So.
Yeah, I could see how like hotspots, you would want to turn that off because you want to see what's actually natural to them, not for them to have to like click a random spot of the UI and be like, oh, there's the button. Like, what if your button didn't look like a button? You don't want them to have to rely on that.
Mm-hmm. I would love to see, oh, the circular shape. Oh, okay, interesting. So we got a question around wanting to, if you have your prototype set to a mobile device type, so something like either an iPhone or an Android phone or anything like that. In prototyping mode, you're going to get the touch target cursor and not the normal cursor, which it's great. I could absolutely understand the need or the want for being able to swap that out or maybe hide it as well. So good feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be cool to be able to, I guess you could take off, if you take off in prototype mode, you take, even though by default, let's say you start a brand new prototype and I'm going here and saying, I would like a iPhone. And of course, then now in prototype, I'm going to be like set to this device. I can actually take off that device, but I'm curious. I've only done this a few times. Here, let me go back here. I'm guessing it'll still have that touch target type.
You'll have the normal cursor. Yeah.
Right, but I don't get the device. Got it. Yep.
Correct. Yeah. So that's one way to do it. If you were trying to use the frames, like the iPhone frames or the Android frames, you're going to lose that if you switch it back to presentation mode, but you could add them in manually too if you need them. So.
Yeah, it looks like we have another question. This one's from a bit back, so I'd like to get it from Christian. Is there a way to have a border on one side of a shape? And unless Anthony can swoop in like a guardian angel, I'm going to say not easily, not easily. In other tools, and the Figma team is aware of this. We're aware of the fact that this is a shortcoming. Right now we put a stroke. It's all over, right? There's no independent corners kind of a thing here. Of course, you could always kind of fudge it, and this is what I do, is that I do a drop shadow with no blur and zero blur, and like that. So this is my way to approximate a one-sided border. Anthony, any more to offer on that one?
I think that's it. We're back to CSS workarounds.
I know.
This is a big one for the team as well, and they are aware. And wow, it comes up quite frequently. You can certainly do things like just adding an additional shape. You could even put it in an auto layout if you wanted it to scale appropriately, but that is a lot of steps just to add a one-sided border. So I got my fingers crossed on that one.
It really is. And I will say that I'm personally really excited about a release that's going to be coming out for the team that I helped spearhead. But it was all of you that asked for it. I can't reveal what it is just yet, but there's just things that, yes, we can work around. Like, we're all pretty good designers. We can find really cool ways to do this, but like, we want to save ourselves some time. So these are important concerns, more important than they seem. Like, I think we should have independent corners for sure, and borders. Okay, we've got another one here. Do you have any neat workarounds for swapping a regular object with a component? So you create like a rectangle. I like that idea. I don't have one. Do you have one in your head, Anthony?
There are plugins that can help to do this. So today it's going to be harder to swap out things that are so Figma today doesn't have the ability to have a shape and then give you access to the instance swapping menu as well. There are a couple plugins. I need to look them up and tell you what they are, but we will find out. We'll tweet them out afterwards too. But there is one by Gleb, I believe, one of our power users, does a lot of really amazing work. And it will let you select any old shape and actually swap it out with a component as well, so, or an instance of a component. So.
Awesome. I think we're at time. Anthony, thanks so much for helping prep this and putting out these cool tips. Thanks everyone for coming and just asking all these cool questions. I'm glad we had time to get to most of them. Let me scoot back real quick here. Remember that if you do have more questions or want to pick Anthony or Maya's brain, like here you go. Twitter links on the top, and then we've got our emails. I love getting emails. I love responding back to you. This quite literally is our job, is to be here to support you and to listen. So, and we're happy to do it. That's why
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do a quick shameless plug too, if that's cool.
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome. This Friday, or actually, I believe it'll be Friday. Depends on your time zone. We are doing the Figma Athens group is doing a fantastic meetup. This is going to be a global event. Everyone is invited. Please just go type in, just Google Figma Athens. We can give you the registration link here as well too. Tons of great talks. I'm going to be speaking about some ideas around future of design, not in a TED Talk way. I promise it's going to be very practical things that we can actually use and apply right now. But I will drop this into the chat for everybody as well too. So
I'm trying to find the link. So I was trying to assist, but
got it.
Yeah, please drop it in the chat.
And it sounds like we've got Figma Germany is coming up too. Again, that figma.com/events is gonna have access to a lot of those things. So you'll be able to track them there.
So very cool. Thank you everyone for coming. Thanks for showing up to these streams. It means a lot to just have you in here asking real questions. You're the best. Thanks so much. We'll see you online.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.